That would be Donna Lupardo, Assemblywoman, New York State. Yes, it is.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here tonight. I have to tell you that I admire this group's interest in the Constitution. I've read the Constitution, but I probably don't know it as well as all of you do. And I want to thank you for that. It's forced me to read it a lot closer. And it's forced me to think about the work that I do in relationship to your concerns about the Constitution. There are a couple things that I'm involved with that I think you can relate to, but perhaps it might be easier for me just to give you a little bit of an overview as to how I got to this point. You know, I moved to this area, some of you may not know, about 35 years ago to attend graduate school. And I love this area. You know, when I moved here, really it was honestly before the economy collapsed. And I thought this was a great place to live and to work and to and to just enjoy this beautiful valley. I wound up working at the Binghamton University. I taught there for 10 years, and then after that I spent 15 years working in community mental health. And as I was working, the economy collapsed, and I attempted at the time to sell my home. I was single at the time, and I owned my own home, and I couldn't sell it for what it was worth. And it was that point when I made a decision that I was either going to stay here and help rebuild this area, or I was going to take my losses and go back to where I came from. And that was a turning point in my life. And because I decided to stay, I got involved in politics. And I ran for the county legislature, and then I decided to run for the state assembly. 6 years ago, I ran because I was an angry person. I was aggravated about a lot of things. A lot of the things that you're all aggravated about right now. Perhaps we would have taken different methods or different courses to address the anger, but I was angry about the lack of reform in Albany. I was angry about the lack of attention for the southern tier area in the state assembly. Not necessarily the state senate, but in the state assembly, it was as if, my opinion, that the southern tier region wasn't really even on the map. And I was very frustrated about the lack of legislation to handle certain key areas, specifically Medicaid reform is one that I'll mention. 6 years ago, it was the Brennan Center that came out with the report that first called the Albany legislature the most dysfunctional in the country. And let me tell you, when I got there, it's true. It was the most dysfunctional in the country, and it still is pretty dysfunctional, but some changes were made. When I got there, you didn't even need to sit in your seat to vote. Lobbyists could take you out to dinner the night before and then come and talk to you about bills the next day. We managed to stop all of that. We also had public authorities running amok, empires own benefits going to companies without any kind of subsidies, without any sort of accountability. We also had a budget that had not been on time for many, many, many years, decades it seemed. We also wound up looking at a legislature with an ethical gap that you would not have believed. I got involved with the Attorney General and some others. I'll give you one example of the thing that I think had the largest impact. We passed the bill that created the Project Sunlight website. And it was that website that started to help us connect up the dots between the member items and the lobbyists and the schemes and all the things that some of my colleagues who are now in jail, rightfully so, were engaged in. One of the problems I'm having right now is, as a reformer who wants accountability and wants honesty and wants member items, if we're going to even have them at all, to make sure they go to a good cause and not to some family member who's going to wind up benefiting from it. We wanted to make sure that those individuals, the light would be shown on them. Interestingly enough, though, in the process of identifying these crooks, all of us have been cast in a bad light. And I honestly find that a little bit offensive, only because I welcome my colleagues who are sitting in jail, because they have abused the public trust and deserve all of what they have gotten for their effort. Another thing I found is that people didn't even know where the southern tier of the state of New York was. I still to this day have to write, whether I'm writing on a napkin or a piece of paper. You see here, these are the throughway cities. Down below is an area called the Southern Tier. It covers a whole range of areas from here all the way across to Jamestown. We have unique circumstances here. When you tax the cigarettes, the way we have done, and I voted against that. When you tax clothing, you're sending business, vital business, over across the border. And I have opposed those budget items and will continue to oppose issues that hurt our area. Also, a number of bills that I have been able to sponsor with support from Senator Libous have been very important, not only for our environment, but for work zone safety. But probably most important to you, perhaps, is the Second Amendment. I understand that I represent an area that's very concerned about that and have supported all of the interests protecting gun owners' rights. It may seem funny to some of you who see me as someone who maybe perhaps progressive in a liberal way on social issues, but I have backed you up, those of you who care about that particular amendment, almost exclusively. And I voted against many of the bills that I'm sure you would have opposed: 50 caliber, assault weapon, micro-stamping, registries, and attempts to take away your owner's rights. So, I'm a reformer. I work with Senator Libous and across party lines, and I'm very, very proud to represent you in the state assembly.
Broome County was ranked 23rd in the United States of all counties as far as property taxes. What are you going to do to fix this problem?
Well, that's a good follow-up to the previous question. When we look at county budgets, having been on the county legislature, I can tell you that fully 50% of the property tax levy goes to Medicaid. It's a real shocking number, honestly, when you think about it. And what's even more shocking is that a full 1/3 of the state budget goes to Medicaid as well. It's huge. Some people refer to it as the mother of all unfunded mandates, the sprawling entitlement. The Lieutenant Governor just recently referred to it in his report. I think what we need to do is to take, first of all, we're going to be taking we're going to take the administration of Medicaid away from the counties. We must follow it up right away with a full fiscal takeover. I think it will force the state, honestly, because we're talking about $7 billion that the counties are spending on Medicaid, which could immediately transfer into property tax relief. We may not even need to be talking about a cap on property taxes. We can take away what they're spending 50% of it on. It will force the state to really examine the fraud, the waste, the duplication of services. And truly, 75% of what we spend money on Medicaid goes to the disabled and the elderly in nursing homes. We want to spend more money on home care, less invasive care, less expensive care to keep our seniors in their homes. So honestly, I think there are ways that we can address it. We've done some actuarials on the actual, time's up. Oh, sorry. That's right. That's an important point. That those extra services are really peanuts by comparison to the reforms we need to make for the disabled in the nursing homes. So we need to take it over in the counties.
Are you going to vote for Sheldon Silver?
Let me try to explain how this works. It's been 51 years since there's been a speaker from upstate New York. I would like nothing more than for us to have a speaker from upstate New York. At the very least, we need term limits on leadership so that we can have a change of people. 75 members of our 105 are from New York City, Long Island, and Westchester. 2 names are put up, one from the Republican side, one from the Democratic side. Honestly, they control the board. Other names are discussed, but largely our New York City colleagues control that choice. And until a viable candidate emerges who can manage to weave together all of the various disparate elements and boroughs and voices, that's the person they're going to be putting up. And that puts me in a bit of a jam, as you can well imagine. I can either marginalize my district and vote for the Republican candidate, or I can support the person that my majority of our colleagues put up, and that's how it works. And as a result, I am a team player on the team. But I can assure you that I look to the day, and when it's not 51 years, that it's sooner than later, that we have a speaker from the upstate region who can represent the interests of all of us in a lot better way. Thank you.
On the issue of guns, you voted against preventing domestic abuse offenders from gaining gun licenses. Why is that? You voted against preventing domestic abuse offenders from gaining gun licenses.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I have a very solid voting record on gun issues as far as creating the ballistic registry and the microstamping and all the rest of it. There are a couple of issues I have concern with, and I am very deeply committed to victims of domestic violence, and was persuaded by the argument at the time that we needed to really examine that. I also have a bill that I know the scope people in the NRA have had a little bit of a concern with, on a similar vein, that would take weapons away from people who have been found mentally incapacitated or who have been adjudicated in a court of law. Would put in place a method for their weapons to be taken away, but then returned to them once they were deemed by a court of law to be fully recovered. There was an issue with that bill about what would happen to the guns if they happened to be sick for a year or two and they were valuable weapons. We need to go back and straighten that out. But I was definitely persuaded about the domestic violence concern, and but we'd be more than willing to look at that to see if it overreached, because I think that's the concern with so many of the gun bills that we have out there right now. So, look at it again.
Thank you for Assemblywoman Lupardo. You say for what major reform legislation did you sponsor this last session? Okay.
Good question. I sponsored ethics reform legislation. Unfortunately, our colleagues decided that they wanted a weaker bill, and the governor vetoed it. We couldn't get the colleagues to go for a stricter ethics reform. Campaign finance reform so that challengers have a more equal playing field when they run against incumbents. I sponsored a bill that would rein in the out-of-control public authorities. We also sponsored a bill on redistricting reform so that we could have, again, a more even playing field for election districts. Quite clearly, when the districts are drawn by incumbent members of the legislature, it's designed to essentially help them be reelected. I'm willing to let that go to an independent board. We've also looked at various entitlement programs that the state is giving out to create jobs that are intended to waste a lot of money. So there's just a few things that